Once you decide to do research, again, you have to think about scientifically studying various things. We have to decide on a research design. And there are different types of research designs. For example, depends on what kind of information we're looking for. Suppose that we wanted to find out who had the best fans between the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox. Two baseball teams, or at least I think the White Sox are, but two professional baseball teams in Chicago. Who has the best fans between the two? Now, one way you could analyze that is maybe in a quantitative analysis. Now, in the word quantitative, I want you to look at the word and you see the word quantity. Quantity. And when you say or hear the word quantity, you think of numbers. So we're going to think of statistics. Quantitative analysis is using numerical data to try and analyze something. So if we're studying the Cubs and the White Sox, maybe we decide to study, how many people actually go to their games. Which one has the highest attendance rating? Which one gets viewed by more people on TV? And so on. Which team sells the most, stuff in terms of like hats and shirts and jerseys? Which one has the most income in that regard? You could compare those numbers, and based on the statistics, you might be able to say, well, okay, we think the Cubs or the White Sox, whichever one, has better fan base. But I think you're missing out on something if you just look at the numbers. Most people, especially fans of the Cubs, will tell you that one of the things about their fans is they are known for their loyalty. You hear about die-hard Cubs fans, people who were born in the 1600s and they still root for the Cubs even though they haven't won a World Series since prior to Columbus. Those kind of things. So qualitative analysis, okay, and the word qualitative, you see the word quality. We're looking for more depth in terms of our information. And how can we do that? Well, we might interview people. So let's say that we interview a series of Cubs fans and we interview a series of White Sox fans. And through those interviews, we might find out a whole lot more information that might help us to make a decision than we would have if we would have only looked at numbers. Now, is either one a perfect method? Not necessarily, but I do want to make sure you understand we can use both methods, and each method gives us a little bit different information, a little bit different way of analyzing the same type of information. Okay, so quantitative analysis, qualitative analysis. Another way that you can look at the research in psych is to determine whether it's applied research or whether it's just what we call basic research. Applied research obviously is something that you can apply in the future to maybe improve the quality of behavior that you're getting. For example, research on therapies for drug addicts. Okay, if we can improve those people's lives by doing research and figure out ways that they can improve the quality of their life, that's great stuff. So applied research is stuff that you can really use to improve the quality of life. Basic research tries to answer certain questions, but in terms of maybe having a real application to it, it usually doesn't. Okay, for example, on this slide, studying the differences in kissing, in types of kissing that people have. It's interesting, sure, but is it going to improve the quality of our life in the future? Probably not. Is there, any major application to it? Probably not. Although these two seem to be going at it pretty good. But that's the difference between applied research and basic research. And then the last thing we'll talk about in terms of selecting a research design is the purpose. What's the purpose of your research? And that a lot of times will tell you what type of research design you're going to do. For example, if you're just simply looking to, describe behavior, if you're looking to see, what do people do and how do they do it and so forth, you might just use observation. Simple as that. It might be something like a case study. You could use a survey, but a lot of times observation, just observing and watching people to see what they do and then maybe trying to describe their behavior. If you want to go a step further, you might do a correlational study. And we'll talk more in terms of correlation. This is a biggie here. You have to understand correlation. But in the word correlation, I want you to see this word. You see the word relation right here? Correlation, you see the word relation, and we're going to add a ship to it. Okay, so we're going to talk about a relationship. Okay, relationship. Correlation basically predicts relationships. That's what it is. It looks at naturally occurring relationships, tries to assess how one thing might impact another. Now, it does not, and very important you understand this, correlational research does not specify cause and effect. So we might say two things are related together, but that does not mean that one thing causes the other. Weddings. They have found over the years that weddings that take place inside of a church building tend to last longer than weddings that don't take place in a church building. Now, does that mean that the church building causes that wedding or that marriage basically to, be stronger? Probably not. But all we're saying is they're related. Okay, there's no cause and effect, but there is a relationship between the two things. And again, we will study that quite a bit more in this unit. And then the last thing here is experiments. And when we talk about experiments, we are trying to find cause and effect. That is the purpose of an experiment. So we're going to talk about independent and dependent variables. We're going to try to figure out if the independent variable causes the dependent variable, what effect it has, and we may manipulate the independent variable in various ways to see what kind of results we get. Now, the thing about this, okay, when we talk about cause and effect and human behavior, it's very difficult to understand cause and effect with human behavior. If you're studying chemicals and you mix chemical A and chemical B together and they explode on Monday, if you mix them on Tuesday, they're probably going to explode as well, and on Wednesday and so forth. So in something like that, in a natural science application, whether it be biology, chemistry, physics, in those types of things, you can say one thing may cause another thing to happen. With human behavior, it's much more difficult to say that. Okay, we have a really difficult time specifying that any particular behavior is necessarily caused by one particular factor. Usually, when you talk about human behavior, there is a multitude of reasons why a person did something. So to try and narrow it down to one single thing, very difficult. That's why in psych, we will use experiments, we design them, we run them, but oftentimes we cannot prove cause and effect. A lot of times, even though we're trying to prove cause and effect, we may end up coming up with a correlation instead. So even though it's an experiment, we may not be able to determine cause and effect. You might want to take a look at page 33 of our textbook because it does tend to kind of detail these in a little bit more specificity. Is that a word? You know what I mean.